All right, folks. What makes a good story? Every story has a couple components. There's a hero, a villain. The villain could be a person, it could be a situation, it could be a system. It could be that person's own self getting in the way. But there's a conflict then. The conflict has to come to a climax, and the climax has to have a resolution. Now, if you like rom-coms, we could identify that pretty easily. There's a person that is just desperate for love. They're always getting in their own way. They see the person of their dreams. They want to engage this person, but there's always circumstances that prevent that. They're across the room from each other. They don't connect well. When they do connect, there's this tension. There's this, I want to say this, I love you to you, but I don't know how to say it, so you don't say it. And what happens? Oh, there's a job opportunity across the country, and so the one person says, well, I'm going to take the job because you've never said I love you. And then what's going to happen? Well, they part ways. There's a moment of clarity, though. And that person says, all right, I'm going to go and find this person. So they rush on the subway, they take a taxi cab, they jump on the motorcycle, and they get to the apartment only to find out that the person that they love left 2 minutes prior to go to the airport. So what do? They jump on that motorcycle, the subway, the taxi again, and they now go to the airport. And they run all the way there, bypassing security, and they get onto the plane without a ticket, and they say, I love you. And the person says, I love you too, and now we can live happily ever after. Now that is every rom-com, so I just saved you a ton of time in the future by not needing to go to these movies. That's every one of them. My mom asked me, what do you think you're really good at? And I said, Mom, I think I'm really good at a lot of things. She said, no, you're not. She's like, what you've been really good at, though, through life is telling stories. And I said, okay, well, I'm going to do this TED Talk thing. I'm going to tell stories. So people ask me, how did you get in the business of social injustice? And I said, well, there was a boy in 4th grade who, as he walked down the hallway to the cafeteria, he noticed something was wrong. Something smelled a little off. Upon opening the doors, he found out that, yeah, he was right. The pizza was burnt. He gets up to the front of the line, he gets his tray, he sees that burnt slice of pizza, accompanied by a heaping amount of prunes, and he said, oh no. And he led the 4th and the 5th grade classrooms out of the cafeteria and sat in the hallway for the next hour and a half, demanding better food. Gets called into the principal's office, the principal says, hey, get back in there. And I said, no, sir. I'm going to call your mother. And I said, yeah, I've heard that before. And sure enough, he called my mom, and my mom came in, and we got waffles and ice cream because it was finally acknowledged this was not right. We should not eat this burnt pizza. So for the next 2 weeks, as I sat or stood on the wall of detention during recess, I contemplated and realized that if you want to challenge the status quo, there's always a cost. It could be personal, it could be financial, it could be relational, but there's always a cost. Well, as a 4th grader, I thought it was worth it. I'm going to tell another story about a lady named Melissa. Melissa lived in New York. At 3 a.m. one time, she heard boom, boom, boom on her door. She opens the door and finds her very abusive, controlling boyfriend and father of her child. Now, I'm not going to go into the details of what that night entailed, but you could imagine it wasn't kind. She eventually moved to the Poconos, seeking a better life. But she was challenged by a way different world from New York City. Transportation, job opportunities, connectivity. She was living with her parents when we met her, and I interviewed her and I said, do you want to be a part of a program that will help you gain self-sufficiency? She said, yes. And I said, what are your goals? She looked at me and said, I want a degree. I want a full-time job. I want my own place. And I said, anything else? And now as her eyes filled with tears, they swelled and she uttered the simple words, I want to be a role model to my children. You fast forward She had to conquer many barriers in her life here in the Poconos. But I can tell you that she graduated from ESU. She has a full-time job. She volunteers in our community. And she sees self-worth. She doesn't deserve to be abused. She deserves to be treated the right way. And when her children had the assignment to write about a role model, you could imagine who they chose. Now, she challenged the status quo because she said, I'm going to disrupt the routine. I'm not going to be a statistic. I'm not going to allow somebody to control me. I'm going to write my own story. Now, this person, Melissa, can be here in this room. It could be your mother, your sister, a neighbor. But it's far too often that situations like this happen and the status quo is maintained. Now, we never actually define what that is. That is the norm. That is what we see happening all around us. That is when we look at something from afar and we say, here's the situation. 5 years ago, a group came into my office once and they said, hey, do you think children of all abilities, but especially children with disabilities, should have a place to play? And I said, yeah. It's a great sales tactic. If you get somebody to say yes to your question, it's a positive experience after that. So they asked, do you think philosophically these children should have a place to play? And I said, yes. And they said, do you want to help? And I said, do what? And they said, we're going to build a playground. And I said, that's awesome. And they said, we have $25,000. And I said, even better. Usually people just come with ideas, but they don't have any money. And then they said, it's going to cost about $500,000. And I said, oh, Lordy. And I started backpedaling now. Oh, I'm not really sure I really know how to do this. I'm not very good at anything other than telling stories. So, and they said, well, let us tell you a story with 3 photos. They pulled out a photo, and the first photo was 3 children getting out of a minivan, and 1 was in a wheelchair. The second photo was the 3 children getting to the edge of a playground, and the third photo was the 2 able-bodied children running into the playground with the other child left behind. And they said, are you in or out? And I said, I am in. Because what they did was another example of challenging the status quo. They said, instead of critiquing, create. My challenge to you today is that. Instead of critiquing every idea that comes across you, create a solution to go with it. Now, I don't always do this very well myself. I sit on the board of a food bank, and we heard a story of somebody coming through the food pantry line, and they scoffed at the idea of getting boxed macaroni and cheese. Now, the attitude that I had that day was, unbelievable. How dare you scoff at the idea of getting food when we are giving it to you for free? And the volunteer that was relaying the story to me, they said, yeah, that was my attitude as well. So I questioned them about this. And I pulled them aside and I said, why the attitude? Why are you not grateful? And they said, every week you pass out boxed macaroni and cheese, and it does me no good. Why? You're getting food. Does it really matter what it is? You're hungry. She said, you don't eat boxed macaroni and cheese too often, do you? It requires milk and butter, if you don't know. I haven't had boxed macaroni and cheese since I was in college, but I remember that was the requirement. She said, I tried to serve my children by just using water, but they wouldn't eat it. So I'm sorry I'm not grateful that I have this useless product in my shelf. It prompted the food bank to take on the initiative of purchasing and supplying food pantries with milk. But it reminded me that challenging the status quo also is having a fresh mind and a new perspective. I didn't have that day. I was looking at it from my middle-class privileged eyes of saying, just go to the store and buy milk, without ever really identifying what the issue was. Now, instead of just looking at the past and encouraging you to make sense of the stories that I tell, I'm going to challenge you to challenge the status quo yourself in your own lives. 3 simple things that you can do to challenge the status quo. The first is get curious. Acknowledge that something's wrong. When I was in 4th grade, I acknowledged something was wrong, and I said, I have to engage this. So the second point of that is empower. Empower yourself and empower others. We have seen this not happen enough, where we question and we critique all the reasons why we can't do something. How could I do this? How could I make a difference? How can I help my community? But you could change that entire sentence by changing one small word, and it's just one letter. Instead of, how can I do this? Wow, I can do this. When you interact with children, I have a 4-year-old and a 20-month-old, instead of asking them, how can you do that? Wow, you can do that. You can do it. You can be that change. Empower people, empower yourself. And the last one is simply do something. Do something. My grandfather once said to me, there's 2 kinds of people. There are heroes and there are cowards. And I said, really, that's it? And he said, listen up. I'm the storyteller here. Cowards do nothing. Heroes do something. We have all been witness to some pretty horrible things in our world. Even in the past couple months, we've seen multiple hurricanes that have devastated our nation, shootings, the attack in Charlottesville. And what we've done, which is really dangerous, is we pulled out our phone, we pulled up Facebook, we scrolled, and we acknowledged that is wrong. And then we continue to scroll without ever doing the empowerment or doing something about it. Now, most of these events have prompted people to think, where do they stand on a certain topic? Am I for racial equality, or do I care more about veteran affairs? Do I believe more in this issue over here, or something on my side? A candle is simply a silent protest against midnight. It shines a light. And when things are really dark, it can shine really bright. And it can illuminate not just the issue of your choice, but those of another person. Love thy neighbor would require us all to care equally about our neighbor's issue as the one that we have. So challenging the status quo sometimes means thinking about it from another's perspective, having the empathy and caring. I encourage you to take that with you, to challenge others and to challenge yourselves. Thank you.